Welcome to the Confessions Podcast. I'm Cindy Wagman.
And I'm Jess Campbell. We're two former in-house nonprofit pros turned coaches and consultants to purpose-driven organizations.
After years of building up our separate six-figure businesses from scratch, we've thrown a lot of spaghetti at the wall and have lived to see what sticks.
We're on a mission to help other nonprofit coaches and consultants looking to start or scale their own businesses past the six-figure mark by pulling back the curtain.
Whether you're still working inside a nonprofit and thinking of one day going out on your own, or you've been running your consulting business for years, you understand that working with nonprofits is just different. We're giving you access to the business leaders who serve nonprofits as their clients. You know, the people who truly get it.
No more gatekeeping, no more secrets. This podcast is going to give you an inside look at what running a successful nonprofit coaching and consulting business looks like. Basically, we're asking people how much money they make, how they get paid, and what has and hasn't worked in their businesses.
Listen in as these leaders share their insights, their numbers, and the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to building a nonprofit coaching or consulting business. We're going to empower you to make the power moves that give you the income and freedom you set out to create from day one.
You ready? Let's go.
Hey, Jess.
Hi, we're back for another round of confessions.
Okay, I can't even sing because I don't know the song, which is a running theme of this podcast. I know. But today we are going to talk about the Confessions song. It comes up in the conversation, but more importantly, we are having an amazing conversation with Simon and Nikki from Fundraising Everywhere, who I think their business model is so cool. And I would say they're
so cool.
They're so cool, and they're killing it overseas and growing in North America. And they're just leading with their values in such a unique and powerful way.
Yeah, I love speaking to both Nikki and Simon because I think sometimes when you're a consultant, especially at the beginning, and you're balancing being equitable with also, frankly, just getting paid, it can feel like a rub. And Nikki and Simon really walked us through both their decision-making process, their bounce off of each other, and then also about, how to run a business that doesn't include sacrifice. I mean, maybe that's not even the right word, because they don't see it as sacrifice. They see it as just what's the right thing to do, even if that might mean less revenue, because they always see those, planting seeds or putting flowers out to come back to them tenfold.
Yeah. I mean, they clearly think through every decision that they make and how it aligns with their values, and things that we don't always think about, still have that lens. So with that, it's a pleasure to introduce our conversation with Nikki Bell and Simon Scriver from Fundraising Everywhere. Nikki, Simon, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, how are you?
Hello,
Good.
welcome. Good. So for those let's dive in with who are you and what do you do? Because I'm so excited to talk about your business. I think you've made a really interesting shift in how you serve the sector. So give us a little background. Nikki, you want to start?
Okay, cool. So my background, I've worked with charities now for about 12, 13 years. So I actually started in-house at a local, smaller organization, and then worked for large nationals. Amazing jobs. So a lot like other kind of class fundraisers, started in face-to-face and did the telephone door knocking thing, moved into community, and spent a bit of time after the in-house jobs working as a consultant for a couple of years. And then it was during the time of consultancy that I bumped into Simon and was asking him for some public speaking skills, which I'm sure he'll cover in his intro about his background there and why that was. And then through working together and kind of being on the conference circuit in the sector, we realized that there was huge barriers in the professional development space and people accessing the tools and confidence that they needed to do their job well and to be safe and supported. And that's where Fundraising Everywhere came from. And for anyone that isn't familiar with Fundraising Everywhere, we are an online training and support community for fundraisers everywhere. And we exist to make the sector a better place for fundraisers. And we do that through conferences and webinars, authenticity and just human connection, and bringing people together in an online accessible platform.
Yeah. And I'm Simon Scriver. So before Nikki, BN, I started as an on-street fundraiser. I think you might call them canvassers or chuggers, some people call them. So that was next year, that'll be 20 years ago, which seems really like the numbers don't seem to add up. But yeah, nearly 20 years ago. And I worked in fundraising agencies and I worked in-house in a charity. And then I was a freelance consultant. And then, as Nikki said, we bumped into each other. And we we felt like something was missing, something wasn't working. And, you know, some of the resources that we wanted in our growth as fundraisers, especially as junior fundraisers, that were never there, we wanted to deliver. So we wanted to put that out. And so we looked at ways to do that. And that was the birth of Fundraising Everywhere.
You missed out the part where you won the public speaking champion.
Well, I don't like saying that because my anxiety levels over COVID have just destroyed me. So now if I tell people I'm a good public speaker, they're like, well, no, you're not. But yeah, so I used to run a lot, or I still do. I run a lot of training and speaking at a lot of conferences. And yes, I did represent the UK and Ireland at the World Public Speaking Championship. And I got disqualified because I went over time. So I do have a love for public speaking, but I also have a massive fear of it. And I think that's kind of come into Fundraising Everywhere as well. You know, there's a lot of people out there who have so much knowledge and so much experience, but they're afraid to share it. And so a big part of our Fundraising Everywhere journey has been trying to like help people step up who maybe have never stepped up before. And I mean, that's one of my favorite things we do is we give people their first speaking gig. So that's been a really important part for me.
I have so many questions. So I'm going to give you a choice. This is a choose your own adventure scenario. You have a tech platform, essentially. So we can talk about that, but you're also very values driven. So you get to pick which direction we head in first, building a platform or running a business that puts your values first. Where do we want to start?
First.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you have made very intentional decisions around how you place your values into your business decisions. Like Simon, you were just talking about making sure people have opportunities to speak who would typically not participate in other spaces. I know you pay your speakers and you have lots of other ways that you continue to live your values. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those decisions have been and which ones were easy and were there some hard ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a big part of it was in that we pay speakers. I think, you know, that kind of sums up a lot of what we do because we, you know, not just around speakers, but paying and compensating for their time fairly, you know, people who are around us and people who help us achieve what we help. So, you know, we try to pay our staff fairly, and we try and pay our staff well. Even during this kind of cost of living crisis, we've just given them all a pay rise. Everyone except Nikki and I got a pay rise. So things like that, you know, really trying to look after our staff with flexible hours, in the way that they all have very different needs and are very different people. And so we try and kind of just make it very equitable. We do a lot of work in our recruitment and in terms of, you know, getting access to people. And Nikki is much better positioned to talk to that because really I have to defer to Nikki with this, like the work Nikki has done with the company in terms of keeping us on the right track has been amazing. You know, obviously Nikki and I have a lot of shared values, which is why we went into business together. But the work there's a lot of work behind it, and there's a lot of research behind it, and what you assume is good is not necessarily good. So there's been some really interesting things that have been brought in that were new to me. Things like when we recruit staff, we give them the interview questions in advance, and that was a really interesting move that we did in terms of just making it easier and opening up these positions for people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have been able to achieve that. And some of the perks we've given staff and some of the ways we've kind of worked with partners and stuff, it's always just been conscious of like, is this the right thing to do? But it's been a lot of work. And Nikki has just been, I have to say thank you to Nikki because Nikki's kind of led on it, really.
Thank you. And for a lot of the kind of sector facing stuff as well, because it's important, like Simon said, we have to kind of like live it and feel it as a team for it to be able to be pushed outwards. And in terms of things that we've done for the sector, so we started off our very first event, paying speakers. And then when the company started, because initially it wasn't meant to be a company, it was just supposed to be like a once a year event that we did as consultants. And then once we hosted that first event, pre-pandemic, in September 2019, we were like, actually, no, there's more that we need to do here. So we just like went all in with it as Fundraising Everywhere, the company. And then as soon as we I think it was like May, like 2020. So really soon after, we upped that pay for speakers. So it's like 250 euros per hour now, and they don't have to ask, everyone gets it. We are the only organization as well, like from day one, that's had very clear like EDI goals, and we measure those consistently and publish them. So we've actually just put a review out on that, and we've overachieved, which I'm really excited about, but there's still more to do to make sure that we continue that work and also make sure that we're reaching the right people in terms of our attendees. So that's kind of like the stuff like the day-to-day, but then I guess like the key moment for me in like realizing like what we do and why it's important and how good it feels was in 2020, there was news in the UK about how COVID was impacting charity organizations and how like a third of charities were going to close and 9/10 of those organizations were going to be ones that were led by or exist for people of color. And me and Simon had a chat about like, what could we do? And we were like, all right, well, we'll give access to our stuff for free. But when we were chatting about it, we were like, well, the stuff that we have doesn't help them because like it's a completely different position and situation that they're in. So we came up with the idea of a fundraising conference specifically for people of color and the situations that they were facing both in society and the sector. But obviously we were like, we can't lead this. We need to hire somebody with experience in this, paid, obviously. And we brought Martha, our jobbie, in, who's mint. I'm sure you've heard of her already. If you haven't already got her on the podcast, like definitely get her on because she'll be great. And she just like took it to like mint levels. Like it was huge, like reached loads of people, obviously did loads to bring income in, which then got donated back out to charities. But the key moment for us around like our values and how that helped is then we then gave that event to Martha and JMB Consulting, which is a Black-owned consultancy. And we're just like, look, like for why it exists, like it has to be owned by you because you can do more for this. Obviously, you can do it consistently. It can't just be like a once a year thing. They have, like, they've just completely took it and flown. So, but we don't like, we weren't like straight on and like, oh, we've done this. Like it's just constantly like every day, like how do we make decisions based on what's right for people and the sector? Like we barely, we'll get into the number stuff later, but we barely like look at the budgets and the income and stuff. We're like, we'll do it, and then like a few times a year we'll like look at it and review it. Speak for yourself. I don't feel like I'm dreaming about it. I'm stressing out here every day. I know, bless you, and thank you for taking that on. But yeah, it's just, I think because we've been on the other side, we've been a fundraiser, we've been a consultant, and obviously, can you swear on this podcast? Okay. So obviously, like we've had the shit stuff that's happened to us and we've been treated like shit. So we always want good to go out to other people, and whether it's small things like paying invoices the day they come in to big things like that. Like it's just what would you do to make humans feel good? And that's pretty much what drives our decisions.
I love you. I
love you too.
We just met, and I've said this on the podcast before, like nothing makes my blood boil more than people of privilege. Like we're 4 white people talking on this show right here. that like are so superficial, like they say one thing, do another. Like people who walk the walk in my eyes are, I mean, I'm just really like, thank you. And I've already learned 4 ideas from you. Yet I'm sitting here thinking, you all are running a business. And so, number one, how do you afford to do this? You also just mentioned that you all haven't given yourself a raise, which, you know, that comes from a place of privilege, right? So I'm wondering, number one, my first question is, number one, how do you afford to make these decisions? And number two, what has been the ROI, or what has been some of the positive results that have led or resulted from this type of action or leadership or anything like that?
To the latter question, the more good stuff that we put out, like we know that good stuff comes back. Like we know that if we do things equitably and fairly and just do it in like a human way, that people are going to want to like join us as a community. And whether that's, you know, a speaker coming and sharing their knowledge through the platform, which then obviously results in people joining events and paying for a ticket, that's what happens there. Or whether it's a partner wanting to sponsor. And we have a partner policy. We don't just partner with anybody. Like they have to be like on the same vibe as us. And we have said no to people because they have come in and been like, we want you to do this, that, and that. And we're like, no, that's not what we're about. So, and we this year, no, 2022, last year, we did invest in how we communicated with the sector. So we brought in a head of growth marketing and a community manager to look after our community. And that was a big thing for us, because once we did that and we were able to share more stories, you know, talk to people in the right places in the right way, and then look after them when they were in, that obviously has built the income from the business over the last couple of years. And in terms of how we get paid a wage from the company. So, but this is one company that we have. So we have Fundraising Everywhere, which is the one that we're talking about. But we also have the platform that we run the events on, which is a separate one. So they kind of help us in different ways in different places.
But on that point of privilege, I think I think, you know, obviously we are coming from a place of privilege to, I mean, especially myself in terms of white male with a decent background. You know, Nikki, well, I won't speak for Nikki, but Nikki working class and lots of issues, but no, not really. But you know, we both recognize that there is a place of privilege, but it's in terms of like how you afford to do it. It's not about, you know, it's not about us running this unpaid or making complete sacrifices. It's about that everyone can make, you know, I suppose these little sacrifices to make a more equitable world. And, you know, if we're looking for a truly equitable world, the top 50% of people have to reduce what they have. You know, that's just maths. And so everyone kind of has to do that. But at the same time, you know, there's ways to do it. And I think like with our partners, we take extra time to talk to our partners about why they're paying what they're paying, because, you know, obviously we need them to fund some of it. And when you explain, you know, that we want to pay all of our speakers or that we want to do this, they can get behind it. But everyone has to make that little sacrifice, and then that all adds up to make it runnable. But I think, yes, there's a level of privilege there. But I think so much of what we're doing is stuff that, you know, we truly believe every business can do, and every conference organizer can do, and every person out there can do. We hear a lot of excuses about why they can't do it, you know, especially around things like paying speakers. We always get pushed back on that, and people telling us we shouldn't be paying speakers and things like that. And that usually comes from more of a place of privilege. Like the privileged don't want to make these changes because it jeopardizes their privilege. Whereas for us, it's kind of like, okay, we know we have to take a bit of a hit on this. And it might cost us in the short run, but otherwise, why are we doing this? You know, what's the point? Because then we could be earning way more in the private sector. And so, you know, there's lots of ways we could be doing this, but just trying to keep ourselves in check the whole time. It's worked.
And, you know, I mean, despite the growth that we've had over the past few years, there are like sticky moments as well, like as you'll experience as business owners and freelancers. So to make sure that like the people that we work with and our team are all looked after, like there have been months where me and Simon haven't got paid. Do you know? Because that, for me, it's like the future of the company is more important that they keep that there. So it's not to say that it's all been like rosy and smooth. Like there have obviously been sticky moments, but I think like when you're doing, just to bring it back to that point that I was saying before, like when you're doing good, like the good will come back. So I've learned to have grit there and know that it's all going to be all right in like 3, 4, 5 months.
And we haven't done everything right. We've made mistakes, you know, and maybe not done things the best way they could. But we've always tried to be really open and transparent about it, you know, and we, you know, with a couple of our, say, partners that we've been maybe unsure of, we've put it to our community and we put it to our members and asked them what they would like to see happen and try to take that on board. So I think there's a big divide in the world today where it's like people see the options as doing nothing good or doing everything perfectly and flawlessly. But actually the truth is we're all kind of somewhere in the middle. And I think what we're trying to do is not be afraid to make mistakes, but actually not make them twice, maybe, you know, kind of learn from what people are doing, people's pushback to us with, what people say to us with, ask a lot of questions. Like I ask a lot of stupid questions, and that usually kind of is quite enlightening. And just being really, really aware that we don't know everything at all. And so we're learning this with everyone else around us.
Yeah.
Okay, Nikki and Simon, we are back for another round of rapid fire questions. You up for playing?
Heck yeah.
Okay, amazing. Who is a nonprofit speaker who you think more people need to know about?
Oh, God, we get so many speakers. Who's caught your eye?
I would feel really bad, like if I said someone and then not someone else.
Just
really
sorry. Great start, isn't it? Like rapid fire. Like,
do you know who we should rave about is Josh, a friend of Fundraising Everywhere, Josh Lee. And he does a lot of speaking, and you know, I'm going to say that people should pay attention to him because he's such a smarty pants. He's so entertaining. He's so fun with his talks. He talks at our events sometimes, and if you haven't heard of Josh Lee, he's a bit of a digital marketing guru in the nonprofit sector, he's actually based out of Germany, but he's an Australian guy. So he was the first one to come to my mind, but I generally think about Josh 24/7.
That's true. And when you were talking about like mint personality and like vibrancy and stuff, I don't know if you said that about Josh, but that's what I think about. But Jeff Boachi, who we've recently had on some of our events, he was working for Shelter, and is now kind of gone down the consultant route, and he's like on this mission to take everything that he's learned as a digital consultant and working with big charities and like giving it to the smalls. So I really like that, and I know that he's do a lot with the smalls. So yeah,
love it. Okay, next question. What is the best event experience you've experienced?
Do you know what? I think you were at this, Cindy. Were you? Were at the Donor Love Rendezvous in Toronto? Were you at that, the first one?
No.
It was a really lovely vibe. I mean, I love any conference in Canada is especially fun because Canadians are just so lovely. But that was one organized by the likes of Rory Green and John Lepp and Jen Love and excuse me if who I've forgotten there. But I remember that, you know, there was a guy there in his pajamas, and it was a really like bright, beautiful venue, and they had like poutine at the break and things like that, and it was just really and you know, all the event experiences that have stood out for me are the ones where it's like really homely and friendly, and you know, it's a bit laid back and things like that. Like we went to one in Bratislava? And it was just so friendly and so lovely. And so, yeah, I think anything where it just feels like it's just a gathering of people as opposed to a big like hotel talking at you kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm quite introverted, so it takes me like 10 minutes to think of an answer. So maybe rapid fire isn't my strong point. But since Simon was talking, I've had time to think. And from a virtual event perspective, we hosted an event on our platform from an organization called Women for Women. And it was absolutely mint. Like the hosts were just like so like energetic and human and like really, you could tell that they got on and they were just really like bringing that vibe across to people at home. But they had like a lush program of talks. So they had like, you know, just people at home like talking about why the organization mattered to them. And then they had like interviews, they had activists, and then they had like a break with a sound bath. And it was just, it was lovely. Really, really good. Like a really great way of showing how like events don't have to be like this polished and perfect production. It's just about like connection and people. So I really like that one. So shout out to the Women for Women team.
I love their team. That's a good a good example and organization. Okay, last question. If you each could call in a dream sponsor, who would it be?
Sponsor like a company or a company? So I mean, I got to be thinking from the angle of getting free stuff, and it's hard. It's actually hard now because any company you mention that could sponsor is almost certainly unethical. And there's some like, because the one I want to say, the first one that comes to my lips, I'm like, this is like the nicest company in the world. But then I'm starting to remember all this terrible stuff people are saying. But I want Disney. I want Disney to sponsor. And I mean, one of our dreams when we set up the company, we said we know we've made it when we do a staff away trip to Disney. And I think that's a great way of cutting costs, is getting a Disney sponsor who will fly us, the team, out there to maybe host an event from there. So I'm going to say Disney. I'm not interested in all the pushback about all the terrible stuff going on behind the scenes.
You can send that to Simon at fundraisingeverywhere.com.
This is rapid fire. You cannot expect me to look through all the layers of ethics. That's the first one that came to mind.
We would do due diligence.
Fun fact, maybe not Disney, but Abigail Disney, who is, I think, the daughter of Walt Disney, is a huge activist and very, very interesting in terms of what she's done with that legacy. So
and trying to untangle some of the, I mean, weird beliefs of the historic Disney. So yeah, but already that I can see my answer is a bit problematic, but
well,
it's okay. We won't cancel you.
We'll talk offline, but I know someone who should speak at one of your conferences. He's been a speaker at one of mine, and he heads up the Roy and Patricia Disney Foundation. And he's this amazing African-American photographer, like putting all of his money into South LA, like Sean Escoffery.
You've just manifested that, Simon. You've spoken it into existence.
Yes.
Well done.
We've got our in.
How about you, Nikki?
Well, my first thought was Ben and Jerry's, because I thought if we could send everybody who attends our event like a tub of ice cream, like why wouldn't you sign up? Like, however, that would be. And also, like,
I would be at every single event.
Well, we do plant a tree for every attendee that comes to our event. So, you know, you could plant a tree, you could have ice cream. The choices. I'll send you ice cream, Cindy. And they do a lot. They say that they're an activist company that's funded by selling ice cream. So I like that vibe. But I was also thinking something like, you know, Patagonia, because they're like, you know, they're owned by the planet now. And I was like, I'd love to do something with them where we could take virtual conferences like out, like away from the desk. Because one of the things that me and Simon talk about quite a lot is you don't have to be at your desk with a virtual conference. Like you can speak from anywhere, you can take it anywhere. Like you can be outdoors. And I'm quite an outdoorsy person. Like I love like all the mountain stuff. I'm trained to be a mountain leader. So if I could do something to like combine the mountains with virtual events, that might be amazing. So yeah.
I mean,
anyone in Patagonia,
listen,
it's on our roadmap for like, you know, to really encourage people to watch these events in different places, in different groups, and kind of, you know, even while they're walking and things like that. And you know, shout out to people like Paul Nazareth, who's done his net walking for years. You know, I could totally see a group of people hiking up a mountain, all listening to the same streaming event as a conference. And then every once in a while, as they have their break, they're discussing, you know, the session that was on before. So I think there's a lot of scope there to bag Patagonia and Disney.
Here we go. Say it and it will be. Thank you both so much for playing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So many great insights there. And I want to talk a little bit about, because I want to talk about the business model. We've talked a little bit around it, but you have these virtual, I don't even know if you want to call them conferences or summits or sessions. You have a membership experience. Yeah. But you have, you have sponsors, you have members, and by having members, you have community. So tell us a little bit about how the business gets paid. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so our income comes from primarily, you've touched on the three sources of income, which is ticket sales, membership, and sponsorship, sponsors and partners. And so, the three of those are reasonably balanced, I would say, that actually each one probably represents about a third of our income. Obviously, it's changing quite a lot because we're only a few years old. And things like membership grows, what's the word, where it just kind of keeps growing, because obviously it's a monthly or an annual thing. And so you're kind of building on that, whereas ticket sales, every day you have to sell more tickets. So something like membership is growing, but our income comes from about, split equally between those. So ticket sales, it's just people attending our one-off events or our conferences. We run a lot of free events as well, but we've got like the premium conferences and events that people pay for. The membership, people pay a monthly fee or an annual fee. And it's actually way cheaper than buying tickets. And then you get access to everything. And that's been a real focus for us, because obviously it's recurring income. It's, we know it's coming in next month, and like regular givers and for nonprofits, it's the bread and butter. So we put a lot of work in terms of moving our ticket purchases into that funnel to try and convert them to members. And then our partners, we touched on that, like our sponsors, just really trying to work with the right sponsors who share our values and not seeing it as like, I feel like when we talk to conferences or when we go to conferences, it's almost like they try and trick attendees into talking to sponsors or something. There's a weird dynamic between sponsors and attendees. And so instead, we've really tried to find sponsors who bring value to the attendees and actually give them something they're going to learn and give them something they use. And that seems to work much better in terms of conversions and keeping attendees happy, but also keeping our sponsors and partners happy.
It's really helpful, especially someone that's just getting to know your business. And I run some of my business is similar in style. I have 2 virtual conferences. One is for the nonprofit fundraising community. The other is for nonprofit consultant and coaching community. And one of the things that I learned when I surveyed my nonprofit consultant community is that the number one pain point that a majority of folks have is lead gen. And you all have a very one-to-many business model. And I'm curious, with the ongoing nature of your events and growing your membership, where and how are you generating leads on an ongoing, consistent basis?
So we have a kind of large mailing list already of around 10,000 people. And that tends to be like the main driver of a lot of the events that we have going on. And we have a fantastic head of growth marketing who I want to name check, Alex Agidis, who makes all the magic happen. And she does a lot of work in outreach into the sector, either through social media, whether it's, podcasts like this for people to find out more about what we do and hopefully want to take part in it. We also work with affiliates. So other people in the sector who have like a big community and big lists as well. And they will promote the conferences into their own community, if obviously it matches with their niche, because we have different topics of different conferences, and we pay them like for the people that they refer on to us. As Simon mentioned, like a big focus for us is to make sure that we have people in as members, not only because it's good for recurring income, but it's good for building community. And we've brought in Mandy Hine, who's our community manager. And she does a lot around like social listening, like in the sector, both online, in articles, in her networks as well, with like her volunteering that she does. And she just reaches out to people and is like, can I have a cup of tea? So there's like a definite like split there of like your depth stuff of like, hey, let's get to know each other. What's your problems and how can we solve it? And then obviously you have the social stuff. We did try paid social twice. Didn't work. But we tried it twice. For us, it's all about like, where can we go where maybe people feel a little bit not valued, and they're already thinking like, hang on a second, like I deserve better. And then we want to kind of be there and being like, yeah, you do, like this is where you can get it. So those are the methods that we have at the moment.
Yeah, there's like a huge range of different things, because we have like our partners and our sponsors kind of bring in leads, through their own contacts. Our speakers bring in leads. Our speakers encourage people to register for events. We have things like, you can do this with any product, but one of the great things with virtual products is we can give away as many free tickets in theory as we want, so we use that a lot to get people on our lists. But this started even before the company, when both myself and Nikki were consultants, we both had mailing lists. And I can't speak for Nikki, but I started building my mailing list when I was in my previous job. When I was working in a charity, I knew eventually I'd be a consultant. So there was a lot of like blog posts, speaking at conferences and building that list. And so, it was amazing when we did our first conference. It was quite easy to secure sponsors and to secure speakers who wanted to work with us, and even to start selling tickets because we already had these lists behind us. And so we've just kind of grown on that. The beginning is hard when you're building a list. And so I think you do have to start, even before you're selling anything, you have to start building that list. And we had done that, and it paid off at the beginning. And now it's just, we're able to invest back in it through the ways Nikki said, and just keep getting ourselves out there, keep running free things that brings in lead gen, keep speaking at conferences, keep doing amazing podcasts like this, anything we can do to kind of get people across to pay attention to us.
What was it that I was going to say? I've kept forgetting it, and then it came back, and then it's gone away again. Never mind.
I've gotten to the point where I have to have a pencil and paper next to me and write down all the ideas.
I know it was something very. Oh, that was what I was going to say. Yes. Because obviously we kind of came in with the values thing, like we have to start with this conversation. This year we've definitely seen like an uptick in people promoting us without, people that we don't know before. And, because when we started, because we were on the kind of conference circuit already, we had like this kind of group of people and stuff. But now we're actually seeing people that we've never, met before being like, Fundraising Everywhere is mint, like you should get involved. And that feels really nice. But I know that's not accidental. It's because of the work that the speakers put in to like give a mint show, that Alex puts in and Mandy puts in. So it's really exciting to see that pay off.
Well, that word of mouth, we can't stress how important that's been for us. The first conference, people sharing how great it was on social media, that really helped. Actually, us asking people to promote it, as cringy as that feels sometimes, it really works, trying to get some key influencers to share it. And I think word of mouth, especially at the beginning, was so important for us. And just by trying to do things right and trying to be human about it and trying to be a little different about it, it caught people's eyes to the point that they would actually tell someone or invite someone. And so, it's great now seeing people, that we don't know at all recommend us or point people towards us. That's been amazing.
We should highlight as well that we don't use like Zoom Teams. Like we have our own virtual events platform that we host our own events on. So for us from day one, the reason why we built that platform was because experience was really important. And that actually is our overarching word of 2023. It's experience. We're like, if we can give every single person that interacts with us in whatever way an amazing experience, whether it's as a speaker, as an attendee, as a partner, good stuff will come. So that's my word for the year and the team's word for the year. They don't know it yet because I haven't presented it yet. They'll find out about it on this podcast, but it's like experience. So even when people come to an event, the reason why they're sharing it isn't just because, they've seen this content that's made them feel amazing. Like the whole platform and everything is great as well. So everything about it is just like share worthy.
Did you notice I was pretending that I knew the word was experience? Because I was like, this must be something I've just forgotten. This must be. But last year I remember, I don't know if you remember this, Nikki, but we had a good few speakers who came out of speaking of a conference, and they were like going onto social media saying, I've had just such a great experience as a speaker, like recording a session with us.
Yeah, like unprompted. It was nice.
A few people did, and they said they had a great experience. They got paid. It felt different for them. And that was great promo, and it's not that we were like trying to get them to do that. But again, if you're just like, it's such an old cliche around customer service, but if you kind of treat these people right, they will go and tell people.
Mm. Also, one day we'll have Rakesh on this podcast when he's ready.
Love Rakesh.
I know, the best. So I want to talk a little bit about the platform, understanding that this experience, and I would say overall, like you're disruptors, right? You see a problem and you're like, let's fix it. Sorry if that term made you uncomfortable. Like, Are we though? You're disruptors in the sector. Own it. I would love to hear, because I don't think either of you have a background in tech, yet you saw this gap in terms of there was no platform that would give you the experience you wanted to create for your audience. So you built it. Like, how the hell did that happen? And tell us about what that was like.
This is all Simon. Full credit to him. So I'll let him take this one.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much credit I have because there's obviously lots of problems all the time, or there used to be anyway before we started bringing in people who actually knew what they were doing. But yeah, I mean, at the beginning, it was like, you know, I'm a bit of a nerd, and you know, even as a kid, with my dad, I was kind of big into computers and learning like basic programming and stuff like that. So, but really just like cursory knowledge. Just I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert on anything. So for that first conference, yeah, I mean, one of the things for Nikki and I, it was like, you know, things like Zoom and stuff, it looks so pants, and just a lot of the options out there were just so bland and so not the vibe we wanted to give. And there's so much like extra stuff around it. And we were like, no, we just want people to focus on this. And the only other thing we want people to do is get in touch with us, you know, for the next step. And so we were like, okay, I think we can actually build something like this. And I mean, one of the great things about today, these days, is the internet is just, you know, I know, Cindy, you're like this, and I assume, Jess, if you hang out with Cindy, you're probably the same, that you can go online and you can find a tutorial of how to self-publish a book, and you can do it all for yourself from there. Or you can go online and you can find out, how do I, you know, create an animation, and you can, you know, it's all there. And the stuff that you don't have the time to do yourself, or you can't be bothered to learn yourself, there's so many people around you who are willing to help for not that expensive to get these things done. So that first platform we built, that kind of MVP, to do the first conference, you know, I basically built that from scratch, and I run a bunch of tests and tried things. And there's a really terrible story. I don't know if you remember this, Nikki, and I'm not sure if I've ever said this publicly, but there was one time I was like trying out the live streams, and I was just in bed with like no clothes on. And I didn't realize that I was actually streaming live to YouTube.
Oh my God, we almost got cancelled before.
We started. Yeah.
Good grief.
So
have you taken that video down off YouTube? Is that gone now?
It's our highest viewed video, actually. No.
Of course.
But so obviously there's mistakes made, but we learned a lot from that. And then after that first conference, because we came away with a bit of budget, and we came away with a commitment that we were going to really put time and effort into this, then we brought in we brought in professionals, and they essentially rebuilt the platform based on what we had learned from that MVP. You know, we saw what worked, we saw what didn't work, and we scoped it from that. But we're continually evolving from that. And I mean, that's the hardest thing, is there's so much we'd love to do, and we'd love to throw lots of money into this, but we're just not there yet where we can. We have lots of we have ideas for the next few years of what we'd like to do with this platform. And it's just about, okay, when we can secure this funding, we'll do it. But at the moment, it's just, we respond to what the audience says and what attendees like and don't like. And our whole thing is about, again, how do we make this an experience, which is our word for 2023. How do we make this an experience where you don't just feel like you're watching another webinar, but that there's like a buzz in the chat box where people are getting psyched, where there's a bit of messing around, there's a bit of fun, there's a bit of emotion in it. And yeah, so that's been it. So it's not that we had any like super tech skills. We just were able to kind of teach ourselves enough to do it. And then we knew when we hit our limit, and we started bringing in people who could do it better than us. Did I miss anything, Nikki?
Just that when we did that, people were like, this platform's mint, can I use it? So we actually launched that as a separate business as well. And, you know, since then, we've had hundreds of charities that have come and put their own stamp on it, which has been so lovely to see. And I guess that for us helped another issue in the sector, which was this online connection and that engagement and that interaction and that humanizing was really important for charities, but they lacked the same kind of time and resource. So we help them now, and it's fully serviced. So they get our team as well, like behind the scenes, helping and managing everything. And it's just been so lovely to see them have the same experience that we're talking about now with fundraisers, with Fundraising Everywhere, with their supporters, like with their staff. And it's just been so lovely. There've been so many like tears from hosts, like proud crying, from us, and like, proud crying to our clients and stuff. Like, it's just been such a lovely few years of like growth and just seeing like where those possibilities and those boundaries are, and like we haven't met them yet, and like that's really exciting that there's still a way to go. Just getting started.
That's so rad. And it leads me to my next question, which is, as we come towards this, and I say with quotes, post-pandemic, because I don't know what phase we're in right now. Cindy literally is just recovering. So, but I'm wondering, as we move into the next 18, 24 months, what are some of the things you're looking forward to, or maybe willing to experiment with, especially knowing that, online fatigue is a real thing, and problem solving for that, which is tricky in itself, can also be more expensive. So I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts for like, where are things going?
Well, just to steal one of Simon's thoughts, like people aren't like bored of virtual events, they're bored of shit virtual events, which they will not find on our platform. And we actually, not just us, but there was a report released recently. I can get the source up while Simon has his, input. But we've actually seen attendance to webinars and live events increase. So yes, we did see like a dip in early 2022, like as people were trying to like work out like what's happening and things like that. But we've actually seen an increase to attendees in our events. Last year, 2022, we had 4,000 or over 4,000 attendees to Fundraising Everywhere, which is obviously more than the year prior. And as the quality of what we do increases, like we're seeing more and more people come back. Speaking from a Fundraising Everywhere perspective, that will only continue because the squeeze on budgets for training for teams as goes down. Like obviously when the cost of living crisis hit, like there was a freeze completely. And obviously we've priced stuff so that people can pay for it from their own, but also like from a holistic view of the sector and what's important, virtual events is like a key solution to a whole lot of issues that faces us, around sustainability, around accessibility, around inclusion, around like, ROI and saving costs. Like virtual events solves all of those problems because people can take part from wherever they are, in their own home. I'm in my pajamas right now. I mentioned that to Cindy before we started recording. Like, this is amazing. Like I couldn't do that in an in-person event. I could, but it's not really professional. But also like people are just like more relaxed and they're able to absorb more information, like when they're comfortable in their own surroundings. And that's like a key requirement if you go into something for professional development. And also from the Everywhere Plus side, the platform side, we did see last year we had the same amount of people hosting events, but their duration of the events went down. So that has been a key thing around like how long are people willing to take part in these things. So that's a key thing, but their attendee numbers didn't. And in the instances where we hosted events that were hybrid, the online event actually had more attendees than the in-person one. And that was towards the end of the year. But obviously at the beginning of 2022, it was still a bit up in the air, but we did see that start to kind of like even out with the trends by the end of the year. Simon, do you want to pitch in on that? And I'll get my source because it's important to give those when you give stats.
Yeah, well, the thing I was going to say is you've got to remember that we started pre-pandemic and pre-cost of living crisis, and the reasons we started, they haven't gone away, and I remember, I'm not going to name the conference, but we came up with the idea at a conference because me and Nikki were looking at this, like, people have paid thousands to be at this. There's these huge, they've flown in and created God knows what amount of emissions, including ourselves. There were buckets of buffet food that was just being taken away to be binned. There was, more than 99% of the fundraisers and nonprofit staff out there can't afford or don't have time to get to these events. So that hasn't changed pre-pandemic, during pandemic, after pandemic. That stuff is all there. And so, I get into a few arguments online once in a while where people are like, no, virtual events, they're not going to happen. They're not, they're dead. I would much rather be in person. And I'll always go to the in-person one. And there's such a statement of privilege, this idea that you can just go to these things, or you can speak at these events for free and pay your own expenses and things like that. And yes, some of us can and might continue to do that. But, I struggle in Dublin, I struggle to get to a lot of the conferences I want to get to because I have to fly. And so I don't go to them. I have a kid, and half the time I'm a single father. So I can't get to those things. And these are the same problems that people are facing all the time. And are no surprise to anyone except the people of privilege who are saying, well, virtual events, who would go to that? They're not the same. And they're not the same. And Nikki and I are very firm about this, that we're not trying to replace in-person events. I love an in-person event. And when I can get to one, I'll go to one. And there's lots of benefits to it. But there's lots of benefits to a virtual event. And they sit lovely alongside each other as part of your professional development, as part of your networking throughout the year.
I love that. How about that source?
Notified.
Say it again.
It's a company called Notified. So they are an events platform in themselves. So I had a little look there. So that's where those stats were from, around the increase in attendance.
I love
Very
that.
responsible.
And we have our own
source
report coming out soon. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, cool.
I was just saying, very responsible source quoting. That's great to see on the internet.
This is a professional podcast. I have
True.
Not one of ours.
Yeah, this isn't one of our
super professional over here. Which leads me to my last question, which on this podcast, we do always encourage our guests to share a confession with us about the nonprofit sector, your experience being a consultant. What is your confession, Nikki and Simon?
I've been to the Usher song all day. It's been in my head. These are my confessions. It's stuck in my head.
See, Cindy, even in the UK, they know that song. I don't know
where I was that year, but I missed it. I know Usher, I know everything else, and this will haunt me for as long as we have this podcast because
everyone's saying. Oh, okay. That's your outro for this one then, when you edit it in later. I guess it's not a confession, but I think it's important for people to understand, from not speaking on Simon's behalf, but mine, you might see, the updates that we put out on social media, you might see obviously the impact that we've made and the growth that we've had. But I guess it's not a confession because it's not something I'm ashamed of, not now, but I do still struggle a lot with, the anxiety and the imposter syndrome, worrying what other people think. And even at the end of last year, when we were going through a rough moment with the business, I had a rough moment, personally with myself, and actually cried at my desk. And I think it's really important that people realize that we are human in this too. And obviously we're trying our best, but when we feel like we're not getting it right, it does impact us in ourselves. And this for me, building Fundraising Everywhere, seeing the difference it makes to people and hearing that and getting that feedback has been a massive growth thing for me as a human, as a leader and a business owner. And that for me has been one of the good things to come out of it. And when I started my charity career 13 years ago, I wasn't in this space at all. Had a lot of insecurities around my abilities, which obviously I probably pushed out to people in my own team. And for now, some of that still lingers, but I am getting better at not the pushing out into the team, but the self-doubt and stuff. It does still linger. So I guess for me, my confession is that sometimes when it seems like I've got my shit together, I haven't. Sometimes I'm just winging it and hoping from the best and coming from a good place. And hopefully, like Simon says, we'll always get that right. And in times that we get it wrong, my promise is to always, put my hand up and admit that and try and work to be a better person.
Yeah.
Is that a good Is that all right? Is that what
that's amazing?
Yeah, how
yes, and
confessions get?
Simon gets to follow that. Yeah, and keep it clean.
So I killed 2 people, and I would double down on Nikki. I mean, I think it's probably not a surprise. I kind of say it all the time when I'm doing talks and when I'm on social media and stuff. But it's nobody knows what they're doing, in the world. And I think, I would be very, very forthcoming in admitting that there's so many things I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm stumbling my way through life a lot. I'm trying to make really smart decisions and talk to people, but, people who present themselves as being the experts, You know, they have knowledge and they have expertise, but they make just as many mistakes as anyone. And so usually the difference that holds people back from success or from getting out there is that kind of self-doubt, or that feeling, you know, that waiting for yourself to be ready and waiting for yourself to be 100% qualified for that next step. And the truth is, like, no one is that, and no one will ever be that. And so, you know, I think, yeah, it's not much of a confession, but I think that'd be my confession, is a lot of the time I don't know what I'm doing.
I love that. And you'll have to, both of you, send me your mailing address, because for Christmas, I bought myself this mug from this creator called We Fun Wow. And it's one of those kind of retro mugs, like the really thick ones at diners. And it says, I have absolutely no fucking idea what I'm doing, because it's true. Like, none of us know. We're just all kind of winging it. And everything else is an illusion. Nikki, Simon, thank you both so much for being here. For our listeners who want to be in touch, to follow along, to join one of your virtual events or any of your experiences, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so if you go to fundraisingeverywhere.com, you'll see all of our events coming up. We'd love you to register for one. We have some free events. We have some paid events. You'll definitely find something that suits you. So do come to any event at fundraisingeverywhere.com, join our mailing list, or feel free to drop us an email through the website. And I won't speak for Nikki, but we're generally always happy to hear from people and chat to people. And yeah.
Oh, let's... So people listening to this podcast, if you use the code confessions, you can have a free one on us. Simon's just going to set that up now for you, because we didn't mention it, but everything that we've done since 2019, all the webinars, events and everything, like, you can just go on and watch them now. We have a massive on-demand library. So get stuck in, have a little look and see what you like. Yeah.
Nice.
Go down the rabbit hole.
Confessions. And you'll get a free one. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you, and for your generosity in sharing all the details and openness,
and your leadership.
Yes, in living
you.
your values and sharing your vulnerabilities. Very #relatable. But yeah, no, we really appreciate it. Thank you both. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. We will see you soon. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you again for listening to the Confessions podcast for nonprofit coaches and consultants. If you enjoyed today's episode, which I sure hope you did, you can show your support in one of 3 ways.
Number 1, post a screenshot of this episode to your Instagram stories or LinkedIn profile and tag Cindy and I so we can repost you.
Number 2, share this podcast with a fellow nonprofit coach or consultant.
And number 3, leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to grow and reach new listeners.
And of course, make sure you subscribe so you can get the latest and greatest interviews as they drop every Thursday.
And to our fellow nonprofit coaching and consulting friends, remember, we're an open book and here to answer your burning biz questions.
See you next time.